Captain Connolly, please. Deputy Connolly. Yeah.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate Deputy Harty and his colleagues in relation to this motion and bringing it before the House, and indeed in relation to his opening statement where he put an emphasis on the provision of this service through the public system. I certainly welcome that. I welcome the Government's confirmation that they're accepting the motion. I certainly welcome that. It's positive. However, it begs the question as to why this wasn't brought forward by the previous government with its overwhelming majority, given that the cost-effective nature of it. It really begs that question as to why this system hasn't been overhauled in the previous government, and actually it gives a lie to the constant mantra that this Dáil is paralysed. This is a very good example of the new politics actually working and making a difference. In relation to that, the actual figures on the ground, our population, while relatively young compared with other European countries, is still ageing, and the figures have been quoted here tonight of 637,567 people aged over 65. Over a quarter of that figure live alone and independently. That's 100,000 more people than were aged 65 in 2011. Obviously, the significant increase in the numbers over 65 and indeed over 85, which is now 68,000 people, requires careful planning and investment. And indeed, the lack of an integrated service, poor transport, disconnectivity and inappropriate housing is actively leading to admissions, unnecessary admissions, to long-term care and into hospitals, which are admissions which are completely preventable. Clearly, what's needed is quality support to enable people to remain in their own home, which is the key and which is absolutely in line with what people want. And most importantly, it is the most cost-effective policy which any sensible government would have pursued a long time ago. Unfortunately, that hasn't happened to date, and approximately 60% of the current budget for the provision of services for older people, approximately 1.7 billion, is spent on long-term residential care. And that long-term residential care, by and large, I think the proportion is 80 to 20%, all going into private for-profit institutions. And yet, only about 4% of people over 65 live in long-term residential care. Only 4%. The reality, therefore, and one that has never been discussed, is that 96% of people over the age of 65 do not live in long-term residential settings and, most importantly, do not wish to. And even more importantly, they want to be involved in the decision-making process as to how they will spend their lives, and they want to be part of the democratic process. In addition, and we know from Dáil questions and answers to myself and other TDs that the actual practice on the ground is that the home care packages, or home help hours, have significantly reduced and in fact are less now than they were in 2008. Home care packages, yes, have increased, but the net increase is not an increase because the demand is higher than what's been provided. The lack of a proper service to help people remain in their own homes is adding to the acute crisis in our hospitals. It's leading to delayed discharges and delayed admissions. And in fact, in reply to my questions, what seems to come out all of the time is what many TDs have said here tonight: families fighting tooth and nail to get the most basic home care package. People having suffered a stroke or other serious illness wanting to go home, their families wanting to take them home, and they're starting a battle of you'll only get 10 hours, and if you fight or if you go to a TD you might get more, and then again if you go to a TD you mightn't. That is the level of what's happening on the ground. What's needed, Minister, and it's been said, is a statutory entitlement to home care. Yes, certainly it will require increased spending, but only in the short term. In the long term, it's going to save the state money and will actually lead to a healthier population in that age group. What's also needed, of course, is increased respite care. We need additional investment in community nursing home facilities. 80-20 is the figure that I've been told, and that's certainly not a balanced market. Most importantly, we need long-term planning and investment, given the significant demographic changes. Finally, there are two specific things I'd like to say. Deputy McSherry has mentioned it, that he did raise this matter, and subsequently I raised it on the public accounts last week. And it was a matter that hadn't been considered whatsoever by the General Secretary, that it might be more cost-effective to look at the domiciliary care allowance, the carers allowance, and providing home care packages, and to do a cost-benefit analysis of that as opposed to the cost of long-term residential care, which is approaching approximately £1 billion, just under £1 billion in 2017, catering for only, I think, approximately 23,000, whereas if you look at all the other packages, on much less money, they're caring for an extraordinary amount of the population. And it certainly came as a surprise to me and Deputy McSherry that that wasn't even considered cross departments, that they might look at more effective ways, more cost-effective ways. Finally, to be parochial, all of this makes perfect sense, and you've nodded many times to speakers tonight. There seems to be, though, a disconnect or a cognitive dissonance between what people want and what public representatives say in the Dáil on their behalf and what the Health Executive is actually doing on the ground. Because Ilár na Gaeltachta in Galia is sa spidgel, tá drám agus níl siad an ein áit all chun crinú a bheith acu Ilár na Gaeltachta. A group, the average age is 80, and they have been not allowed to have a place to meet in a health executive-owned premises for over a year and a half, a premises that remained empty. So on the one hand, the health executive has given them a grant, and on the other hand saying, no, we can't facilitate you in a building, and we're left to writing letters and letters. But on the general point, I support this. My only reservation in relation to the motion is saying that it should be done on the fair deal basis. To me, the fair deal is an unfair deal basis, and I would be most unhappy if we went down that road. But I certainly agree with the sentiment of the motion.